Where's the record button on this stupid thing? There it is. Got it. Perfect.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Welcome to the Innocent Lives Foundation. This is a charity stream. It's a little different than what we normally do. Usually we do gaming or other craziness on here. We do our monthly fireside chat, but our guest today um, has a sort of different schedule and doesn't like to be up late. So we are with Dr. Abbie Maroño, who is, let me get it official before we start, an internationally recognized scientist and practitioner in human behavior, which is fascinating, acknowledged by the U.S. Department of State, my old stomping grounds where I used to work, as a top 1% expert in her field. She has delivered specialized behavior analysis training to elite units. We're going to talk about this for sure, including the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and local law enforcement agencies across the country. Dr. Abbie's most recent endeavor, she's the creator of The Upper Hand, which is a proprietary framework for understanding human decision making and influence. It's fascinating, trust me. Her expertise was recognized by the U.S. Secret Service, who invited her to train this groundbreaking framework at the Nashville Polygraph Conference, where she was honored with an award for her outstanding contribution to their forensic services. But wait, there's more. Earning her PhD in psychology, Abbie became a professor of psychology at 23, which is bonkers to me. But we're going to talk about that too. Now serves as the director of education at Social Engineer LLC, specializing in behavior analysis. She contributes regularly to Forbes and Apple News and has been featured on BBC News, Wired, and Forbes Breaking News. Some of the how long have these people been in relationship stuff that you did on Wired, by the way, hilarious. Like some of my favorite stuff I've ever seen. Um, and Dr. Abbie is a highly sought after expert witness retained for high profile cases, including lawsuits involving A-list celebrities. As an active member of internationally recognized research groups, Abbie was recognized as Reviewer of the Year for her significant contribution to the academic community. Additionally, she's an author, we know this, expert consultant, coach, and a TEDx speaker. You're basically everything we all want to be when we grow up, just so you know. Um,
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
so welcome to the ILF, what do we call it? Lunchtime latte? Is that what we decided? That's what we landed on?
Yep,
I have my coffee. It's tea, it's not coffee, but
I have my
oh,
coffee.
perfect. All right. We're gonna have a good time. So yeah, welcome. So how's it going? Let me just start there. Let's just be human beings first, right?
Yeah, it's going good. I mean, it is stressful, definitely juggling so many different things. And I have just finished, I guess, like a mini accidental tour where I did 6 states. I hadn't even advertised my book, and it had been requested, so I just kind of stacked one over the other. So I'm just kind of winding down after all the travel.
Only to wind back up again, right? Because we just, as we were
Yeah, I
just
go again
talking,
very
yeah,
soon.
as we just, it's just in waves. We talk about in the green room, if you will, about like just what you
Yeah.
have coming up, and it doesn't end anytime soon for sure.
No,
Yeah.
but there's a quote that I read and it said, "Don't complain when your plate is full when the goal was to eat." And I think we have a habit of complaining when there's nothing and then complaining when there's too much. And although it is stressful balancing so much, it is also a blessing to be so busy.
Yeah, that I mean, it sort of dovetails right into the first question, which is like you're super prolific. This is not one book. This is, I mean, let's just go through it, right? So it's the first one. So work in progress, right? Which we had 1,000 conversations, like
Yeah.
how to get out
That
of
was
here.
my heart book. That was the book that I really kind of poured my heart and soul into.
There was a moment where I sent you something. I quoted you, and I was like, no, like this is entirely my brain. This is like I'm living this, and you were like, I wrote it. Like, what do you think? So yeah, that was a real like, oh man, like there, it was go back and reread that section again because
Yeah.
you're trying to read it to understand it, but at the same time, it just takes you into like that emotional, like, oh no, I don't want to go back to that, maybe, or do I, or should I? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And they're the things that we need to go back to sometimes.
yeah, which is kind of the whole thing about the whole purpose of the book, right?
Yeah.
And then now we've got this one. We've got Lily the
Yes.
Brave Lion. That's another heart book
That was
for
a
you.
heart book.
Yeah, this is so good. It's so good. And I know you got a really sweet thank you today from that one.
Yeah.
Um, But there it is. Dun, da,
This is
da.
my brain book. I poured my brain into this one.
There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, which thank you for writing all three of them because they're definitely for a couple different purposes. But like, at what point did you just decide, hey, I'm just gonna do them both? Do the heart books, do the brain books, do the children's books, is a whole different
So
exercise.
I um I was a full-time professor at the time, and I must have been 23, and I was working with Joe Navarro, and him and I were writing a book together, and we had started writing, and obviously I've always loved writing, um, but I wrote academically and I wrote blogs and I wrote poetry and things like that. And then I started working with Joe, and we started writing this book together because we'd done research together so much for so long.
Yeah,
And then we were a few chapters in, and we had this thing where we would call for like an hour every single day. And whether it would be, we'd talk about our personal lives, or we'd just catch up about science or the book. And he called me in the morning and he said, "We can't do this book." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Because you have to do your own." He said, "I'm reading the way that you're writing, and this is something that you need to do. Because if we do a Joe Navarro and Abbie book, because this was before I was a professor, before I was a doctor. So I think at this point I was still finishing up my doctorate. And he said, if we did a Joe and Abbie book, I would always follow him, and my career would always kind of be second to his. And he didn't want his name to overshadow mine. He said he wanted me to step out and make my name, and he wants to support it as much as he can, and then him and I can come together. He said he didn't want to take the limelight from me. And it was such a gift for him to say that, because I didn't really have the belief in myself that I could do it without him. I felt like I needed him, and he was like, "No, I'm reading the work that you're doing." And he said, "I don't want to tread on your writing. You need to do this." So I actually sat down to write a book about efficiency. And that
okay.
was the plan. The book was about how to be efficient, because I was a professor very young. I was nearly finished my doctorate. I'd already had a lot behind me. I'd published a lot, I had done a lot, I'd done conferences, I'd worked with federal agents, I'd worked with serial killer data sets that were some of the biggest that's ever existed. So I had done so much so young that I thought, okay, well, maybe my gift to the world is I write a book about efficiency. And when I sat down to write it, Joe always said, just let the words come. Don't think about the structure, let the words come, let it take you that way. And work in progress just happened. A book about empowerment and trauma recovery just started to kind of come out. And what was so great about it, I wrote it really quickly because I'd had so many notes on my notes page. I put them into a Word document. I had 20,000 words just copy and pasted from my notes that I had there of stories I'd felt and emotions I'd felt and experiences. So when I kind of transferred it over to the book and edited through, the book just felt really right and really natural. And then I kind of realized, actually, this is what I really needed to write, and it needed to be something that felt like me.
I, it reads like you. It like when you're it you could tell that it the natural process to it because
Yeah.
like when I was reading, I was like, it just sounded like I heard your voice like without the audiobook, like just a little bit I was reading. I was like,
Yeah.
that's exactly how you talk. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It,
I had a friend of mine, she was reading it and she said that it was like I was sat next to her reading it to her. And the funny
yes.
thing is, like, I've written courses for social engineer, and I wrote our audio course, and the audio course is narrated by both myself and Chris, the CEO,
Yep.
and we speak very differently. Very, very different. And
Hmm.
I am more formal. The way that I speak naturally is more formal than Chris.
Yes.
Um, and I guess it would be more a little bit more delicate. Like with his chapters, I started them like, boom, information on you. Could you ever imagine those words coming from me? It wouldn't make sense. But I say, further, therefore, thus, and that is how I naturally speak. So if you do know me and you read that first book, it just I had some editing requests about different language, and I really wanted to make sure that my voice stayed in there. So when I used my editors, they knew me really, really
Oh, that's
well.
good. That's
So when
good.
they were doing line editing, there were certain things that were like this would sound better, but it would not sound like you. So they kept everything that was me.
So I love that. Let me just start there. Yeah, it wasn't just let's go for grammatically correct or what
Yeah,
a publishing house would expect or any of that. I start to get that sort of in the daily career thing right now where like a buddy of mine will be like, "Hey, read this. Tell me what you think." And you read it and immediately they'll be like, "Yeah, you just told AI to write something for you. That's not your voice
yeah,
at all, right?" And you can
yeah.
just yeah, it's pretty obvious. Uh,
Yeah, I got asked to review someone's proposal recently.
okay.
Um, and my response was, it didn't sound like you. It felt like AI. And I think a lot of us are really losing our voice. And my editors, um, they have recently had a lot of changes.
Okay.
And I am changing editors. And it is because a lot of what they're doing now is they're utilizing AI. And for me, when it comes to books and your stories, I just think that's a really fine line where, maybe you can use it for some grammar and things like that. But the reason people read your book is because they want your words. I've had a lot of feedback from my books of people aren't just buying the second book because of the topic. They buy it because of who wrote it. They
Yeah.
want to hear you in the book. So as an author, if you are utilizing AI too much, it feels like you're kind of cheating your audience.
I so I am a criminology student right now. You know this, and which is a social science. And my department head during our like orientation class brought up what's the policy on AI, and
Yeah,
there isn't one. It's not even per university. It's just per professor at this point,
yeah,
right? And and he said, yeah, he goes, it's a difficult conversation when you are reading something from a student and you know it's not something
yeah.
that they did. And the other professor said, so what was your first experience with that? And he literally goes, yeah, I had to confront one of my students who clearly used AI to write their final in my ethics class.
Ooh, ooh, yeah,
So
that'll
yeah,
do it.
yeah, that'll do it. Um, so before we move off of work in progress, because I definitely want to get to the upper hand, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of your involvement with the Innocent Lives Foundation, and then
Mhm.
of course let everybody know where the heck you're going to be next, because the world tour has not stopped. It is
No,
no,
the work never stops.
which is good, right? Don't complain when about there's food on the plate, as you said.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh, so so we knew each other. I think I think there was our bonding moment was definitely work in progress, and it's almost like a I don't want to say a three act play because that belittles it, but like that first third of the book is a lot of personal
yeah.
information. Yeah. So other than like conversation with Joe about you need to tell your story, write your book, was there like a moment that you just knew that like sharing this was like not just important but like essential to your
Yeah.
progress?
Yeah, there were a couple times. So I think one of the main reasons that I needed the book to be so personal was because where I am in my career now is somewhere that I've always wanted to be.
Okay.
I have awards from the highest level of national security. I've got my PhD. I'm a professor. I'm not at all where I want to be, but I am in a lot of spaces where I wanted to be. There's so much that I want to do, but I recognize that a lot of people look at the places that I am and think, wow, that's unattainable because of what I've been through. And I was doing my TEDx talk and I got on stage and I talked about my early substance abuse and my struggles with substance abuse and my recovery. And I'd gone through some of the traumas that I'd gone through and ultimately gone through alone. A lot of things at a really young age that were really detrimental to my health and very traumatic. And then I talked about my journey through those things. And I didn't have, privilege, right? We didn't have money as a family. I didn't really have anyone hold my hand. It was very much fend for myself. I love my dad, but he's never really been in the position to help me in the way that I needed. I'm disconnected from my mom, and I don't really have a huge amount of contact with my sisters. So I talked about my journey through those things alone. And I remember after that speech, I had a young girl come up to me and she was really tearful. And she said that when I got on stage, and she said I looked like a professor and I talked like a professor. And she was like, "You look like someone I just could not relate to." And she said, I got on and she almost didn't want to listen to what I had to say.
Wow.
And then she said she heard my story and where I am now. And because I had my introduction. So they introduced that I'm a professor in these things. And she was like, this is someone that I could never be like. And she said that when I got off stage, there were so many things in my story that she's currently going through, and that she felt like there was no way out for her and she could never make it. And she said, you know what? Maybe there is a way out.
Wow.
And she said, you did it. So maybe I could do it. And it was that moment that I'm like, okay, there's things that, because I was writing my book at that time, I realized there were things that I hadn't put in the book because of shame, which was ironic because the book's about working through
Right.
shame
Yep.
and embarrassment. And I realized, no, I have to put them in and I have to put in my story because that's the whole point. If I'm telling other people, work through your stuff, work through your shame, and I'm not completely honest about the things that I have done that still cause me discomfort to think about. And when people say they've read it, I'm like, oh, there's things in there that I'm embarrassed about. But it would be so dishonest for me not to put them in because that's the whole point. So I felt like I almost had to.
Yeah. It's a lot. It is.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot. But it's super super impactful, and I think just like there's a just immediate negative connotation around the word shame,
Yeah.
right? And I think that there's a parallel to that in the upper hand, which
Yeah.
is like the immediate negative connotation around social engineering,
Yeah.
right? And interesting parallel there. Let me ask you this one last question on that, and then we'll move to. I swear to God, we'll move to the new one. Is the what, if anything, is the relationship or codependency or whatever you want to call it? I promise I'm not trying to use big words just to impress you. Like I thought all this through. Like what between like shame and imposter syndrome? Like where would you put those two in in terms of how they relate to one another?
Well, largely they're about not being enough.
Okay.
And I think that that is something that most of us struggle with. I know that it's something that I've struggled with my whole life. And it's still something that I struggle with all the time. That we're not enough, whether it's academically, whether it's professionally, whether it's in relationships. You feel like we're too much of this or not enough of that. And shame is really about there's something lacking in me. I'm flawed as a human being. And remember we talked about there's healthy shame and toxic shame, but here that toxic shame is that I'm flawed as a person. I lack something. I'm not good enough. Um, and that imposter syndrome is context dependent of that. Of in this situation, I don't have what it takes. I'm not skilled enough. I'm not experienced enough. So it's really about that element of not being enough. And that's often why there is shame in imposter syndrome too, because it is reflective of how you feel about the self.
That's really that's like the book. That was like a really really intelligent answer that was just handled like as matter of factly as possible. Which is again like I think that's the writing style. I think that's
Thank
how you
you.
I think that's how you communicate, and I think that's what makes even that one girl who was like, I don't know that this person is made to just move from that to it's relational, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And if there is one thing that I could hope that people take from the book, it really is that, it doesn't matter what you have done. It is in the past. And that doesn't mean move on and everyone else has to accept it. Bridges might be burned, and if people don't want to have you in their life anymore, you can't make them. But just because you have done things that you wish you hadn't doesn't mean you have to keep doing them, because we get trapped in cycles. We get trapped in cycles that because I did this, I don't deserve this future, or I could never have it. And you can always make a change. You can always decide, doesn't matter what you've done, you need to find a way to make amends, find a way to take responsibility for the consequences of what you've done and move forward and try and understand how to move forward. But we always can move forward.
That's so good. So that's what this statue literally says forward momentum, by the way. So I'm on the same page with you.
We're always in sync, always
Yeah,
in
it
sync.
seems like a little bit. So talk a little bit about like the upper head is a framework. It's not a like linear lesson of like this is you're going to start here, you're going to finish here, period. Um, what went into the design
Mm.
of the framework, or even the decision like to build a framework in the first place?
Well, I didn't want to just regurgitate literature because I see that a lot in books where they're all very much the same and they kind of take each other's ideas and they just write another book about social engineering, but they're not really adding anything new. And in the field of influence, there's so many books that talk about how to get what you want, right? Do X, Y, Z, get this result.
Right.
And that's not how human beings work. There's nothing that, you see these YouTube videos, do these 5 things, double your income. Do these 5 things, get X, Y, Z. And I see it everywhere. And that's not how human beings work. There is nothing that if I give you these 5 tips and you do them in every situation, going to work. We're just too complicated. We don't need more people saying do X, Y, Z. And then when you say, okay, why? They go, trust me. And that's also how I detect when people are teaching based on AI. When they teach you something, do this, it has this effect. And you say, okay, but why does it work? And they don't have the foundational understanding. That is so key, right? Because everybody can regurgitate instructions, but understanding why they work is different. What I wanted to give people is an understanding of how we make decisions. Because if we're talking about influence, influence is just understanding how someone makes decisions to get them to make the decisions you want them to make. Whether that's a decision to provide you information, whether it's a decision to buy a product or act in a certain way, be honest, whatever the decision is, it's about changing their decisions. So if you're going to change someone's decision, you need to understand where their thinking comes from. So that's why I wanted to write a framework. And obviously, there's a lot of tips in there of once you understand this, you can build these tips, and here are some things that you can do to influence people. But I wanted people to have an understanding of psychology, so if things don't work, if they try something and it doesn't work, they can kind of go back to that understanding and think, okay, well, why doesn't it work? Rather than just all I know is do this. So I wanted people to be able to have that understanding for themselves.
I think that's good because like a we have a one of those things we have is like a pause is not a stop,
Mm.
right? And so if there's that small failure, it's not you're a failure.
Yep. And it's that, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And I kind of wanted that to come through with the book, where I'm not just saying, here's how to influence people, here's your fish. Here's how people think.
Yeah,
Here's how to fish. And then from that, let's work together to catch a fish together. And so we've done our first one together, but you know how to fish now. So you can go and do it without me. That's what I wanted the book to be like, where it's that here's how to fish. Let's go through some examples together. Let's go through some tactics together. We're working through it. So you have some examples, you have a foundational understanding. But when I leave now, your knowledge doesn't end with the book. The book isn't just tactics. Now you can take that and you can build your own from it. That's what I want to give people because that's ultimately what's going to be most effective.
yeah. Now that you with your previous answer, now I'm just thinking how many times a day if I pull up any streaming service, the very first thing is do these 5 things. Men over 50, blah, like whatever it happens to be. Like they're all. It seems like every
Yeah.
yeah. Um, there's a very so we talked a little bit earlier about like the power specific language, some things that you use, like you were talking
Yeah.
about the way that you word things different from Chris. There's a couple terms that you use in the book that I had to stop me like, did I read that right? Like what was that? So tell me about the shelve it and pants yourself contrast because I think
Yeah.
that's it's really interesting. And was that something that was developed for the framework? Was it something that you did through research, or was it something even that you found during the work in progress days, or like how did
Yeah.
how did you land on those two things? Because
Yeah. It
oh,
is so
it's
funny.
really good.
You ask about, so I wanted names for tactics that would be memorable. And it's funny you ask if it came from work in progress because that shelf it one did.
Okay.
When I was writing work in progress, obviously it's about dealing with your emotions and trauma recovery and generally understanding emotional regulation. One thing we feel like we often have to do, and this is both in our emotions but also in our career, is tackle everything at once. So if we're
Yes.
going through a hard time, we have everything coming at us, we feel like we have to deal with all of it. And sometimes when you're dealing with something really horrible, the advice is you have to work through it. And although that's true, sometimes if you have a lot of things on or you're not emotionally ready, the healthiest thing to do is not deal with it right now. You take it, you put it on a shelf because right now, my emotional capacity, my physical capacity cannot deal with that. I'm not suppressing it. I know that it's there and I'm putting it there, but I'm not dealing with it because let me deal with this other stuff. And then when I can, let me take that off the shelf and deal with it. And I always had that with emotions, and I put that a little bit in the first book. And then when I was writing The Upper Hand, I was realizing because work in progress is about that self-regulation, how to build a better relationship with yourself. And the upper hand is about building better relationships with other people. And a really important part of that is your relationship with yourself. Because if you're going into interactions and you are reactive of everything they say something and you get angry. You feel like they've been unfair and you get angry. Your emotional responses, if you're reactive like that, you're putting yourself at kind of a penance, really. Like you're putting yourself backwards because your anger is all it's going to do is take over your critical thinking. So you might react in a way that feels good in that moment, but will be negative for the future. And what we need to do sometimes is say someone says something and it triggers that emotional response. But you know, in that meeting, it's not a good time to do it. It's not a good time to bring it up. Shelf that, put it to the side, deal with it later. And think about this in a more practical sense of say you're in a team meeting and someone has said something that annoys you and you really want to deal with it, but you are in a team meeting. You could embarrass them. You could bring it up. Or you could shelf that emotion, you carry on, and then in private, hey, you said this earlier. This made me feel this way. Now no one's embarrassed. You are not the bad guy because as soon as you bring someone else down, now you are the bad guy and you're ruining that relationship. So it can be in that sense of physically, shelving a conversation or shelving your emotions sometimes. And also shelving your ego. If there is something that you want, and say someone says something incorrect. It feels so good to correct people. Like if they say something and you know they're incorrect, it's just an ego boost sometimes when you're like, actually, that's not how it works. But all it does is make that other person feel really small. And sometimes when we want something from that person, we want to build a relationship with that person, best thing to do, shelf the ego. Shelf the ego. Deal with it. Deal with that later. Why did I feel the need to do this? Or I said something wrong. It might be really important to correct them. But again, correct them in a time that's appropriate. You don't have to do it in front of other people. So there's a number of ways that we can use that shelf it to deal with things, whether it's emotions or conversations or anything like that in a more appropriate circumstance. And then pants it or pants yourself is really about kind of the opposite. Instead of putting emotions to the side, actually putting emotions out there. And say, the example I think I used in the book is say you're in a team meeting and one person has said something that's really making you angry and they're getting frustrated and they're not being cohesive, they're not being polite, they're being rude. And what you want to say and what would be perfectly acceptable to say would be your behavior is inappropriate. Your behavior is inappropriate right now. This is not going to be a productive meeting. You need to be more polite. You need to be more appropriate and professional. But again, you might embarrass that person. And say you need something from that person. Say you want a long-term relationship with that person. What might be a more effective way, instead of saying you're being rude, say, I don't think that right now I'm able to help you in the way that I need. I'm getting a little bit frustrated. So, can we take 5 so I can gather my thoughts and come back and benefit this conversation as best as possible and be able to help you in the way you need? Because right now, I can't show up for you in the way that you need me to. And what you'll find is now you've emotionally kind of pantsed yourself. You've said, "Hey, not I'm the problem," but you've shown vulnerability. And now, when you step back into that meeting, I guarantee in those two situations, if you had called them out, they're going to feel embarrassment. They're going to feel a little resentment. They're going to be a little bit, maybe subconsciously, maybe consciously reactive to you and resistant to you. Now, when you take 5, you've allowed them that time to gather their thoughts without any of those negative emotions. They're more likely to come back, be more cohesive. And often when you pants yourself too and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with this, or this is making me a little nervous, or I'm a little confused, what you might find is other people go, yeah, me too. And it opens the doors for honesty with other people.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that. So I was thinking about one of the examples that you wrote, which was if you're gonna let emotions overtake your critical thinking capacity, right? That
Hmm.
it also opens you up to compromise. So there's an example you
Yes.
use where your partner comes home at 2 in the morning, and then you start confronting them, and it starts flipping back on you. Maybe I am too domineering. Maybe it isn't none of my business. Like there's some
Yeah.
that was a really specific thing that just it resonated really well because I guess you could use one of those two techniques you just described to be like, you know what, maybe now's not the time, right? Yeah,
Yep.
like, yeah. So,
Yep.
yeah,
And with the tactics, it really is up to you where you use them, but they work for professional circumstances and personal circumstances. Because we like to think we leave our emotions at the door when we go to work. We don't.
yeah,
We we don't. We like to say, "Oh, I have a work life and a personal life, and they're completely separate." They're not. They're not separate. You will always carry your emotions from one into the other. It's just how it works with human beings. And if you're not emotionally regulated in your professional life, it's likely you're not in your personal life either. And actually, I was reading or watching this reel on Instagram of a businesswoman I follow, and she was saying that she got a lot of backlash because she fired an employee that had cheated on his wife. And she fired him. And she got a lot of backlash because they were like, it has nothing to do with you or the workplace. And she was like, I disagree. Because if someone cheats on their partner, if someone is willing to lie to the person closest to them, they will lie to you. If they lie to their person, if they lie in their home, they will lie in their workplace because it's a character trait. It is not an isolated behavior, it is a trait. And she was said, I don't want those traits in my workplace because it will affect our company culture. And I couldn't agree with that more. We are who we are. And you have variations of yourself, how you show up in different contexts, absolutely. But those core traits and those core emotions and emotional regulation is such a core thing to us. We carry them across contexts. So if you are not regulated at home and you don't use these strategies at home, you probably are not in the workplace too.
yeah. I think it's very very clear in the upper hand that trust is foundational.
Yes.
It's not a pillar. It's
Yes.
like yeah, it's the basis for
Yeah.
absolutely everything. Yeah. Uh, Speaking of trust, so there, um, chapter two, probably closest to what we do here at the ILF, is
Yeah.
like the dark side of social engineering, which uh, I found absolutely the examples that you used were so good. I researched Bernie Madoff for a book that I wrote years ago, and it was like if you just flip the timelines between
Yeah.
Madoff and Ponzi, it wouldn't be a Ponzi scheme. It'd be called a Madoff scheme. That's how bad they both were, right? And so
Yep.
that was a really great example of how using a third person to sort of build that short term. No, this guy is clearly good. He handles my money. That was really cool.
Hmm.
Um, there's a really good passage in that chapter about influence becomes exploitation, and I just wanted to kind of just see if you would dig into that a little bit. I also hate
Yeah.
don't I hate the phrase double click on that. It drives me bonkers. But yeah, if you just like get into some of like the either um, that feeling, because influence becomes exploitation feels like such a transitional phrase. And
Yeah.
then yeah, and then just what are some of like the misconceptions around influence, like when we talk about social engineering?
Yeah, people think that there's, this really, or people love to say there's a fine line, this is influence, this is manipulation. And I only teach tactics of influence. I don't teach tactics of manipulation. And it would be great to say, as a professional in this field, yeah, yeah, I only ever teach influence. But the reality is, everything that is influence is also manipulation, right? The difference between them is the intention. So if you're using influence with the intention to build a relationship and the intention to make a sale, but not at the expense of the other person's well-being, if you're manipulating, you're trying to get what you want at the expense of the other person. And, I train federal agents, so I would take these tactics. I train Secret Service. I recently just trained FBI leadership. Could I say that the tactics that I use can only be done for good? Absolutely not. Of course, they could be taken and used for bad. That it doesn't mean that I'm teaching manipulation. I'm trying to teach influence, but if someone takes them and has the intention to do bad, then absolutely they can be used for manipulation. I never teach tactics that get you what you want at the expense of the other person. Everything in the upper hand is about building relationships, but absolutely you can use that for negative purposes. Of course you can. Um, but like I said, I never teach them to do them at the expense of the other person, and you'll never find a tactic that I teach that works because it creates fear or because it creates shame or embarrassment. So with those ones, there's a really clear line. But all influence isn't manipulation, but all manipulation is influence, right? And
Ooh,
that's the difference. It's just the intention. And as a professional in the field, I cannot say that my stuff has not been used for bad. It always could be. So when you're doing it, it's a personal responsibility. And that's why I try and make really clear in the book that there is that line, but it's kind of a blurred line. Because let's say you're a salesman and you want to make a sale. So you say I'm using this for good, but what if the person that's bought the item and they say, no, I didn't want to spend that much. So there is a really fine line in those circumstances that you have to make that decision of, am I being honest about the product or am I overselling the product? Am I being honest about this? Am I making this appear more than it is or less than it is? And you've got to make that yourself. And that's why in the book, I talk about the long road versus the short road.
yes.
And this is something that I have always really embodied in my life. And the way I've gone about everything, especially my career, of there will always be opportunities to get what you want and to take advantage of people. There will always be shortcuts in life. If you say that this was your work when it was actually someone else's, you might get this
We
opportunity.
talked about
If
that.
you if you oversell the science and say you can be 100% a lie detector if you do this, you could get more views. You could get more sales. You could sell more courses. You can get your name on different stages. If you oversell your skill set, if you do these things, or if you take someone else's opportunity, push someone else to the side, you get those shortcuts. So you get a quick win. And I see people do that all the time. But if you are just hardworking, if you don't take those opportunities and you miss out on them and say, actually, no, it wasn't me that did that. It was Joe. Joe and I have done this before where people have said this and he's like, ah, that was Dr. Abbie. And people have said to me, and I'm like, no, that was Joe. And that's the way we've always worked with each other. But I've had other people take things that were mine and present them as their own. And I knew they were mine because I hadn't actually published them yet and they did not exist out there. And they got opportunities. But the thing is, when you go about your work honestly, you just try and build relationships. You don't take those shortcuts. Your growth will be slower because you won't get that quick win. But what you will find is people will want to work with you. Your reputation will build because you won't leave people feeling hard done by. And incrementally, you make people feel good. People start to realize this is someone with integrity. They start to see your character. Incrementally, it builds up. And when you take that long road, you might get there much slower, but you will get much higher because they'll have those quick wins, but maybe they can't perform as well. And they leave people feeling negative. So often you see people rise really high and have these horrible drop down. They have scandals. They have people come with lawsuits, all these horrible things, or they just don't keep getting more because they can't perform and people start to see it. So whenever you get that opportunity to push someone to the side, to be dishonest, to put your integrity to the side, always remember, same with influence, when you have the opportunity to use that influence for manipulation and to create that negative psychological comfort or discomfort for them. And you say, if I create fear, I could get this. Don't do it. Think, okay, no, I'm taking the long road. I won't make this sale. I'll be honest that actually you could find something better somewhere else. And eventually you will get higher and you will leave people feeling better and you will have a much better career and you will live with yourself better, right? We all have to look at ourselves in the mirror. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I want to see someone that helps people, not see someone that gets what I want at the expense of other people.
There, the way that you point out the short term and long term in the book is it's something I love because been I've been sales adjacent for 20 years. Like I'm an engineer, but I work with a lot of sales teams, and it's not just the impact on you personally, short term, long term, which is I got this quick win, but now I need to go basically find 20 more marks in order to continue that
Hmm.
momentum, right? But it's the ethical responsibility of I'm getting what I want, but I'm burning this person. And next time
Yep.
that person has an opportunity to buy a home, buy a car, walk by a mall kiosk, like whatever it happens to be, like
Yep.
they're going to have that negative stigma. In this case, around sales, but it could be around basically any interaction, right? And I think
Yep.
that introduces you can get that short term, but think about what you're doing to that person and what you're
Yep.
imprinting on them.
And it's also almost a really dangerous path because if you leave people feeling hurt people want to hurt people. So if you've caused someone pain or you've been the reason that someone didn't get something they deserve, if they have the opportunity to take you down, often they will take it.
Yeah.
And I remember I was working with a woman, working in this little group of women, and three of us were really cohesive and just wanted the best for each other. One of the women in the group was very keen on stealing everybody's ideas and presenting them as her own, and liked to create conflict between other people. Because of that conflict, the group broke up,
Okay.
and there could have been a really great opportunity for us to do a lot together. Now, one of the other women had later come to me and said, I had heard this, that you had said this. Is this true? And I said, absolutely not. And we talked through it. And she said, I came to you because although it was very convincing what I was told, I knew your character and it just didn't feel right. I've known her for longer, but I wanted to have the conversation with you. And we figured out that the other person was kind of creating conflict on purpose. Now, me and this other woman, we are working on a lot of really cool projects together, a lot of really big projects together that the woman who was trying to take the shortcuts and take credit for our ideas is not going to be involved in. And this new project, we have two separate roles. We don't step on each other's toes. What do you want to bring to the table? What do I want to bring to the table? How can I benefit your stuff as much as possible? And how can you benefit mine? And it's been a wonderful collaboration. And it comes out later this year. So I will release stuff on that when I can. But I'm very excited for this to come out because it's all about women empowerment and it feels amazing. And this other person could have been involved in this really amazing thing, but because she was trying to get more for herself, she excluded herself from it. And this is what happens. And this has been happening over about 4 years.
Wow.
Right. So that happened about 4 years ago, that original circumstance. And then over the years, we had been building something new. So this is what I mean about it might take its time, but things creep up because people remember. And if you've been good to them, they want to help you out later on. And Joe and Elvira were just on the phone before this, and we were talking about how a lot of the opportunities we have for speeches and events are because people have remembered how we've treated them. And then years on, when they've had an opportunity to help us, they have come back to us and said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I remember this. And I remember you were very kind to me. I have this opportunity for you." And things have a funny way of coming back to you, whether it's negative or positive. So it's your responsibility when you take these tactics to decide, do I want to use them at the expense of other people or to build relationships with people?
Yeah, that's outstanding. It seems like that is a healthy place to be with now with your partnership with the woman who you've
Yeah.
continued to work with.
Yeah.
So, okay, now that we've got to healthy, let's end there. Let's let's you talked about some of the speaking that you're doing. Obviously, everybody can find you abbiemoronio.com. Uh, what are where can some of the people who are watching and listening and either gonna now or when we post the recording, so where can they find your work, maybe buy your books, watch your presentation, or even just support you, like you talked about being memorable? You definitely imprinted on me when we were talking about work in progress. Um, so where can people just find out what you're up to?
So everything is on abbieMarono.com. So ABBIEMARONO.com. And then I am big on Instagram. I post a lot of reels. I put on a lot of social media on this. That's Dr. Abbie Official. And then LinkedIn is just Dr. Abbie Marono. And
PhD.
I'm not as good
PhD.
at
Don't leave the
replying to,
PhD off because that's definitely in LinkedIn.
yes,
Yes.
I am not as good at replying to my LinkedIn messages. I will admit I have weeks where they stack up and I'm not as good, but I am better on my other socials.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm the other way around, but
Yeah. I'm working. It's a work in progress.
oh, well, aren't we all, right? That's the first book. So, yeah, so thank you so much for being here, Dr. Abbey. Appreciate every conversation that we get a chance to have, and also your continued support for the Innocent Lives Foundation. For anybody who's joining us for the first time, the Innocent Lives Foundation is a non-vigilante organization that identifies anonymous online child predators, develops and delivers specialized training for law enforcement, and provides education resources for parents and children and families. You can find out more at innocentlivesfoundation.org. And we will get this posted, and you can find us anytime again over on the Innocent Lives Foundation um, website and find out more from Dr. Abbie at abbiemoronio.com. And thank you again for being here with me, and you're enjoying your latte and digging into a lot of the cool stuff about the upper hand framework. I love it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Okay, thank you, Chet. We will see you next time.